Again, doing that, you have to also have the confidence to know that what you're saying is not just how you really feel, but you also have to know it's probably going to piss some people off.
Right.
Champions are made behind the scenes, not in front of the camera. When you have four good performers and you have a really good referee, there's so much more creativity that can be done. The person I learned the most from was one of the guys that I credit with training me, which is Candido. Always leave something better than when you found it. When the gear goes on, you have to almost start immersing yourself in that persona. At my age, to still be doing this at a very high level. There are a lot of people that I kind of came up with in the industry have been long gone for, a long time.
Welcome one and welcome all. Hosted by none other than Coach C. Chris Sanders, you're tuning into the Character to Canvas podcast.
All right, everybody, welcome to episode number 6 of the Character to Canvas podcast. In full transparency, when I started this a month ago, I would have never expected my guest, Shawn Donavan. I appreciate you doing this, man.
My pleasure to be on, man. It's been a while, but hey, we're here. We're live. Let's do it.
True full circle moment. Now, the one thing I do, I start every podcast the same basic question. Let me hear your journey. Has pro wrestling always been that number one thing that you knew you wanted to do?
Yes, I did. Since the day I was about 4 or 5 years old, I knew that's all I wanted to be.
So one thing with you, and I see it all over social media, you are hands down, in my opinion, one of the most creative people when it comes to wrestling. So
Appreciate it.
when it comes to your ideas, where do you get inspiration from? I know people like to say shows, movies, music. What's your source for a lot of the things you do?
I would say it's probably a combination of a lot of those different things. It's to me, obviously, studying the industry as much as I do, I never get enough. I'm always looking at everything from different storylines and different angles from all of the different territories that ever existed, Memphis, Texas, Stampede Wrestling from Canada, and looking and just really reading about all these stories and how they were put together. And then combining that with, again, stuff you see on TV, stuff you see in movies. I also delve a lot into reading books, articles about real life things that have happened, the news at some points, because the news can be very depressing, but you can take certain things that go on in life and say, hey, is there a way to turn that into some sort of a story, things of that nature. For promos, I delve a lot into lyrics from a lot of different bands and trying to formulate my own story out of that. So a lot of it too is also just me laying in bed at night thinking of all these different ways to really attack promos, envision a story that I can work with and who's the right, opponent for that story that we can really tell something. So I try to get my inspiration from so many different things. There's not one specific area. I think you just kind of take everything and you just kind of you put it into a blender and you just kind of see what comes out of that. But I also just like to think outside the box too. Sometimes I get ideas from my what you want to call my shoot job,
Wow.
of
Yeah.
listening to stories that have happened to coworkers. I'm like, that's ridiculous, but maybe that could work in wrestling. So,
Yeah.
you've been around our industry for a minute. Sometimes our industry can be run very ass backwards. So sometimes the bigger the idea, the better it can possibly be from all angles.
So one of the things I'm starting to get into, you mentioned, are books. What are your some of your favorite wrestling books or your go-to?
I always read a lot of autobiographies around, people in wrestling or just, people in the world. But I also get a lot of ideas. I do read a lot of books on leadership, just from, having my career outside of wrestling, on how to be a better leader. I also read a lot of coaching books too, because I coach wrestling now too with the Creative Pro School that we have in as part of the WrestlePro company. So I'm always reading a lot of different articles and books and on how to basically better myself as a leader. But I really like reading autobiographies. I also really delve a lot into documentaries about people and history. Just trying to see what knowledge I can pick up from those areas too.
So one thing with you, man, like I was just watching one of your old matches. Remember What Wrestling?
Of course.
And I just like, I don't know, the way you present yourself, the way you like come out, man, it just like, I don't know, like it set the tone for me. So like, what's your like routine for warming up for a match, preparing? Do you have like rituals or anything you do to really get fired up?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're thinking about what's going to happen in that match, and if you're someone that is a forward thinker and kind of envision what is going or what you want to happen before it's going to happen, just feeling that energy of what you can do in there, just kind of resonates with me as a person. A lot of it just comes from my years of doing it and a lot of opportunities that I've had, quote unquote, the doors that have been kind of shut in my face, and still being able and lucky, I say, and I'm not saying I'm old, but at my age, to still be doing this at a very high level, where a lot of people that I kind of came up with in the industry have been long gone for, a long time. So those things play out in my mind. I'm a very big warm-up person. I always do 50 Hindu squats before I go out there. And also one of my pre-match rituals, I always get a 2-pack of Reese's peanut butter cups. I always have one before the match and I have one afterwards.
Wow.
So that's really just, really my warm up. Just me is a lot of it too, is as I'm getting dressed, I'm kind of, when the gear goes on, you have to almost start immersing yourself in that persona, in that personality, and really just getting yourself to a mental level of what you need to do. Because if you are someone that is just you with the volume turned all the way up, it's easy to get into that zone. But if you're someone that's portraying a quote unquote character, if you're really invested in that character and making it work, that's something that's not really your personality, but the crowd resonates with it. I'm sure there's other ways of getting into that persona as well. But for me, it's just really me just slowly just turning that volume level all the way up right before you go through that curtain.
Now, how many years this year will it be for you wrestling?
So I started training in mid to late 2000, took a break, and then really came back and trained seriously from that point in 2001. My first match was November 25th, 2001. So we're coming up on we're in 2024. So I guess we're coming up on 23 years at this
Wow.
point. So yeah,
So,
long time.
so if you can go back nowadays and tell yourself something or a few things before that first match, what would it be?
Don't drink the Kool-Aid,
Okay.
and also bet on yourself, which I did. It just took a few years to do that. I came from an era of the last of a generation of trainers and performers where, for the most part, they would give you all of the knowledge, but not everything. They would give you just enough, but enough that you can get good, but not enough because they feared that you would quote unquote take their spot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like a generational thing at that point. But, also too, I had the luxury of having WWE scouts, come to my school where I was training at very early on, to where a lot of our guys that came up in that time frame didn't break out into the indies until a few years after, because we trusted the people that were training us and guiding our careers and saying that, oh, you don't need to go work the independents, you have everything you need right here. So it took some of us a few years to kind of break out of that mentality and really just start getting on the road. And I was blessed enough to be able to work the early days of Chaotic when it was still the Kowalski Wrestling School. When I think at that time that was like one of the only few places in Massachusetts to really work.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I mean, that was just the theme early on. But yeah, I would always say to anybody now, don't drink the Kool-Aid, get the proper training. If you have a coach, school trainer that is training you the right way, they're going to encourage you when it's time to get out there and go train at other schools and learn different philosophies and styles, go to other shows and help out and network and try to get booked. Never try to hold young talent down. Unfortunately, like I said, that was a thing of the past. I think a lot of quote unquote unwritten rules in our industry have changed over the years, which I think is a great thing. But again, always bet on yourself. Never think that you've trained enough, never think that you've done enough seminars, never think that you have gone to enough shows where you're not booked and you're offering to help and set up and network and see what opportunities lie. Those are all part of the grind that is part of our industry that you have to do.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you is, after all these years, what made you want to go and become a coach?
Really to give back. You know what I mean? I was always of the opinion of always leave something better than when you found it. You know what I mean? Whether it comes to jobs, things of that nature. But for me, I want to say, after hearing so many horror stories of how people were trained in the industry, people that I still hear are not trained properly. I was very blessed to have the right people training me, to really build my foundation earlier, that I still credit as to why I'm still able to do this at such a high level after this many years. And I wanted to make sure that I wanted to continue that, because I want to find what I want to do within the industry when my body decides to tell me, or I tell myself,
Mm-hmm.
hey, it's time to get out of the ring and it's, time to move behind the scenes. So, I've tried to be a sponge and learn how to do so many things in this industry, from doing backstage work to commentary. But I really love coaching. I know, it takes a certain individual to be a coach, because a lot of people want to coach, they just may not have the oratory skills, if I'm saying that the word the right way,
Yeah.
to be able to not just explain it, but to be able to show it. And I really take a lot of pride in a lot of the students and guys that are really coming up that I've trained out of our school, that are really starting to spread their wings and fly. And to me, that's a feeling within my heart that money can't buy, so to speak. When you see the light bulb go off, and I'm sure the way that my trainers saw me when the light bulb went off, I want to see people do well in this industry, especially when you have people that work really hard, and I see the same work ethic that I had and some of the guys that I came up with that are now in bigger places because of the work ethic they have. I really want to build that in people. I know a lot of people like to say that wrestling is for everybody, and as a fan, it is. I don't think as a performer it really is for everybody, and not in a negative way, right? I have seen so many people come through the doors who say they want to be a professional wrestler, and then they get in the ring and they try it, and they take that first bump, or they hit the ropes for the first time, and then they decide, maybe this isn't for me. So I never say anybody don't try it. I always try to tell people when they visit our school or ask me about training, if you're not already in the gym doing physical activity and you're not in great physical shape, take the time to get in the best physical shape you can be to then be prepared for when you do sign up and you do take that first bump, you'll be physically better to say, maybe I can do this. Or you might still say, maybe this isn't for me. So, I want to see anyone that walks through a door of a school that I'm a part of to train. I want to see you see it through. At the end of the day, it's up to that individual to see it through themselves. I can only coach you and motivate you so much, but you as the person wanting to do this have to do all the things that are necessary in and out of the ring to be able to make it. So that's why I want to be, and that's why I enjoy being a coach. I enjoy helping people that are brand new, and I enjoy mentoring people that are already in the industry, helping them, just try to help guide them to get themselves to bigger places, to get recognized by national companies.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you, and you probably have a few answers. The reason I started this podcast was I took a performing arts class in college, and
Awesome.
like a final project, one of the options was a podcast, but then like the response was great, so I kept it going. But one of the biggest things that we learned about in performing arts, which can relate to wrestling, is improv.
Yep.
So have you ever had like something like a storyline or an idea you had that maybe like the fans weren't behind, or something you did that like the fans like end up loving, like that turned like a different direction or something like that?
Trying to think. Sometimes, I've had so many matches, it's hard to remember, but there are always instances that have happened in specific matches where, I'm the villain and the other person is the good guy, the baby face, whatever you want to call them. But for some reason, the crowd just was not into that person as the baby face. And as we started the match, the crowd just started cheering for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying this to put
Yeah.
myself over,
No,
but
no.
from an improv standpoint, anything we had talked about had to go completely out the window. And we just had to reverse roles and call what they say is calling the match on the fly, which I love doing that. And when you talk about improv, like when there's no script or there's nothing that's talked about, you just have to feel and listen to the crowd and listen to what they want. But it also gives you that freedom to try and be creative in the ring to see what the fans will bite on, what's going to catch their attention. Is there a certain thing that you do that will give the ultimate reaction, which at that point would them say to themselves, well, say to the performer themselves, okay, I need to stick with what I'm doing right now because it's working. And if you are someone that has learned how to work on the fly, I think it benefits every performer to learn that style because it will teach you that if you get lost at a certain point, you will know how to improv to get back where you need to be. But also, improving with matches that you don't put anything together with just leaves everything up to the imagination of going out there and just listening to the crowd. It's been done for the last 30 years or so. It was more prevalent in the 70s and in the 80s and to a certain degree in the 90s. But I can't really pinpoint one specific story or anything that I've gone with that has ever kind of just turned a corner in a different way. But that's what we do. We're a physical art form that, if done correctly and you are good at improving, the sky's the limit with what you can do in terms of getting that ultimate reaction from a crowd.
So one of the things I always see on social media, I believe you've been with them since the beginning,
Mhm.
WrestlePro Alaska.
Mhm.
So what was like your take on that, like when it first started? Because I see like a lot of people like checking off like states they want to wrestle in, and obviously Alaska's like a big one that, and you're somebody that pretty frequently goes there. I know you've been doing stuff with LSG, but like
Yep.
what was your take on that, and how's that experience been for you?
Incredible.
Mhm.
I've always said, I always try to use the phrase, stay humble but hungry. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Very appreciative when I look back at all the places I've gone, the things that I've done. But yeah, one of the bucket list things for me before I'm done wrestling is to be able to try and check off as many as close to the 50 states as
Wow.
possible. I think I'm at 28 right now, so I'm a little more than halfway, but never thought I would wrestle in Alaska. I
Hmm.
mean, that up until 19, the two hardest states to wrestle in, really, I mean, there are some hard ones, but the two hardest I've always thought were Alaska and Hawaii.
Hmm.
I've gotten to wrestle in both. So,
Wow.
but it was a great opportunity. The one of the guys that heads up, WrestlePro, had gone to Alaska, loves, taking these random trips, and just thought to himself, man, what if I ran a wrestling show out here? And come to find that there was a guy that was out there that, I don't know the full story, so I don't want to say
Hmm.
exactly how it happened, but I there was really no wrestling going on out there at all. I think there
Hmm.
was one small place, and that's who, the one promoter, Kevin Matthews, partnered with him. And, 5 years later, he just had his fifth anniversary super show.
Wow.
The gentleman that he partnered with has a school. They run their own shows now. He's got like 15 to 20 students. They're all amazing people. So, it's really been fun as an experience to go out there, and not just see the growth of that school, which is 907 Wrestling Academy, but really just see the growth of the WrestlePro Alaska brand, and just to see the interest, not just from fans, but the interest from performers all across the United States and even internationally, wanting to be a part of those shows is a pretty cool thing. And for me to be a part of that, from day one, is really cool too. I mean, yeah, LSG and I, we had some really unique matches there. That was part of a feud that just kind of took itself over there. And we beat the holy hell out of one another in the matches that we had out there. But the experience is great, getting to be able to spend some time and kind of just tour Alaska and
Yeah.
just see some of the sights and everything is really cool. Because a lot of times, most of the wrestlers, when you travel, you're really in and out. You don't
Hmm.
really get to spend a lot of time doing any sightseeing or things of that nature. But that's actually one of the cool things that, the promoter Kevin does when a lot of the guys come out there. I mean, he knows the lay of the land, so he gives everybody, tours to see these things, and really helps not just give them a great show, but he gives a lot of the performers a lot of great memories.
Nice.
And we continue to, grow that brand more and more and more, which is exciting. So, here we are at 5. Can't wait to see where when we're at the 10th anniversary
Yeah.
show.
So one of the things that you mentioned, you've been in the game for a while, so you've shared the ring with a lot of different people, learned a lot
Mhm.
of different styles. Who are some of the people that you feel you've learned the most from being in the ring with?
Man, it's hard to say. I mean, I would say, I mean, I've learned a lot from everybody that I've been in the ring with, and not just people that are more experienced than me. I've learned a lot from people that are more inexperienced from me, because um, when you are that more experienced individual, it's your job to do what you can based on your experience to take the inexperienced person and help bring them up to your level, to make sure that the crowd still gets a compelling match. But I would say early on, the person I learned the most from, was one of the guys that I credit with training me, which is Chris Candido.
Hmm.
Obviously a life and a career cut short. But the man was an absolute gem of knowledge. Like, he was a guy that just could spitball anything, had an experience from any question you asked, but learned really a lot from just getting in the ring with him and training. I never got to work on a live event with him, but got to work a decent amount with him, in training, and just listening to him talk about the industry and tell stories kind of helped shape my mind for not just in ring, but like the psychology of a match, stories of a match. And then as I've gone along, I've learned a lot from just being in the ring with different performers, that were more experienced from me, that had been somewhere. So I don't think there's necessarily one person I've learned, the most from. I mean, if I were to put it in present times, I would say my tag team partner, Danny Maff. I mean, been in the game a few years more than me, but also was in a lot of different opportunities and a lot of different places more than me, where a lot of times I still pick his brain on a lot of different things. I mean, you're talking about a guy that has legitimately, I think at this point, has wrestled now in what, 4 decades
Wow.
of wrestling, and has been in the ring with anybody and everybody that there has been. So, we travel or we're at shows. A lot of times I'll pick his brain. If we're in separate matches, I'll pick his brain about, hey, I was thinking of doing this, doing that. We always, joke. I always tell him I'm the guy that throws the steaks on the grill and he's the guy that seasons them. That's just
Yeah.
kind of how we banter. That's how we put our tag matches together. That's how we help put our stuff together, even when we're in singles matches. Like, that's what we do. So I would say in present times, Maff is the guy that I always pick a lot, because we study so much together and we always throw stuff at each other and to see what sticks.
So to go with that, when you started becoming a tag team wrestler, like what are some of your favorite things, like comparing singles wrestling to tag team wrestling? Because as long as I've always saw you were a singles wrestler, but now starting to do stuff with Dan Maff, like what have you
Yeah.
learned from being a tag team wrestler? Like what are your strong points for each of them?
Yeah, I mean, so to be very honest, when I first started wrestling, I pretty much started in a tag team and was a tag team for a good couple of years. Then I will transition to singles. And then my same partner and I got back together for another run. And then he moved on. But with Danny has been the most, consistent pre-COVID and obviously, post-COVID, we didn't, team up again right away. He was doing some certain things. I was doing things. We just wanted the time to be right. We didn't just want to throw our name back and say, oh, we're back. We wanted to make it mean something. But I think, what I love about tag team wrestling is that when you have four good performers and you have a really good referee, there's so much more creativity that can be done there. Obviously, yes, it's great when you can have creativity when it's just two guys, but when you have four, there's so many different outliers of what you can do from a story perspective, a psychology perspective, ring positioning, from a referee's perspective, especially us as villains, how to draw the referee to the other guys for us to cheat behind the referee's back, and just making sure that we build to what they call a hot tag, building that so that when that big tag happens, we want that roof to just come off the building and explode, and see where we can go from there. So, there's so many fun things that can be done with tag team wrestling that I think sometimes gets too diluted these days. I think if tag matches, keep it simple but creative, instead of really trying to be so creative that things get diluted, I think stories could be told so much better. But again, that's just my flavor, my opinion.
So when I was doing research, one thing that I still see on social media is amazing is like your entrance gear, the vest or whatever you come out to the ring. Is there, like, to go back to the previous thing I've asked you, is there like any inspiration behind that, or where do your like visions for what you want to come out to are?
So yeah, I mean, so it's funny. I've tried so many different personas over my career. And obviously now, after finally, I think for me, I always like to say, I think about say 15, well, about 15 or 16 is probably when I really started to truly figure out who I was. And when I made that transition, the first 16 years of my career, I wore long pants, long tights. And they were always these colorful colors. At one point in my career, I was trying to do a cross between Jimmy Garvin and Rick Rude, but it really just wasn't me. But I always grew up drawing my own gear. This is before social media, obviously. I mean, I literally would buy tracing paper, just, drawing paper, markers, colored pencils, and I would just try to look up different shapes, designs. I would try to draw inspiration from other guys' gear from WWE or WCW and just try to make it my own. But now that I've fast forward and I switched to trunks and really kind of just figured out who Shawn Donavan really was at like year 16, year 17, and really just being me, and just kind of playing into that vintage, that old school character, and really just playing around with designs and kind of figuring things out. Um, I've settled on a place where I'm very happy with the gear that I wear. I'm always making minor changes, minor upgrades to it. But from an entrance gear perspective, like for me, I've always liked that vest look. But then again, you've got to upgrade at a certain point, right? I've done the
Yeah.
vest a number of times. I've done it with chains, without chains, just trying to play into that old school, that ass kicker, type heel, drawing my inspiration from a lot of guys from Japan, Stan Hansen, Bruiser Brody. But eventually you got to try a different turn. So I decided to go in a completely different direction and got a full, sleeveless trench coat. So just trying something completely different to add to the character. I have another jacket that's in the works that's an inspiration from somebody whose career that I've followed and kind of took the idea and made it my own. And I'll debut that when it gets done and made it a certain point. But I was always taught very early on that you should always upgrade your gear every 4 to 6 months. And it doesn't have to be a lot. It could just be a minor tweak. It could be the same pair of tights, just in a different color. It could be a new entrance jacket that's similar, but you add like a new design, a new logo. It's no different than a performer adding something new to their arsenal every couple of months to continue to keep not just their in-ring work fresh, but also, again, adding new things to your character, keeping yourself fresh. It's no different when you're, like you say, you're acting or you're doing improv, right? If you have one style of improv, maybe you try something different. Maybe your improv of what somebody wants that character to be is not who you envision it to be. So you try something different and see if it sticks.
So one of the things when I was watching, I think it was What Two, you were in a scramble, I remember. But one of the things that caught my eye, like, and I still remember when I used to watch you, was like the confidence you had. Where did you like get the confidence, I would say? Because like you said, like the second you come out to the second you leave, like you're Shawn Donovan, you're invested in yourself. So where did you get that confidence?
Well, I can tell you, this definitely doesn't happen overnight. I think it just takes years of repetition, not just in the ring, but I think it takes repetition behind the scenes, right? Consistent training. That's something I really don't see a lot of today. I see a lot of young performers train out of school for a number of months and then they just get on the road and try to work shows, which is admirable. But I always use the phrase, right? Champions are made behind the scenes, not in front of the camera. To build a lot of that confidence, you have to work on your craft behind the scenes in the ring. And I think for me, over the years, my first 7 years in the industry, I was training consistently 4 days a week, as well as on the weekends doing shows. So I was getting a lot of in-ring time. And I think the real confidence started to hit around year 7, right around that time, because I was working a lot of places. I was training consistently. My ring work was consistently getting better. I had my trainers and my coaches were constantly watching my ring work. And just from a character perspective, I wasn't fully confident in the character perspective, but I was in the in-ring perspective. And I think a lot of it had to do, again, I was very blessed to be trained by the right people that helped build that confidence in the ring. I think what really came full circle again for me was when I really truly figured out who I was. And a lot of it was a combination of what I've been through in the industry, the miles I've driven, the things that I've done, the places I've gone, the opportunities that I was given that I earned that didn't, ultimately lead to certain things. and just kind of playing into that character too, of what my character is, and knowing what I can do in the ring. That's where a lot of that confidence comes from. Like, this is not a play on anybody, but for me, um, I feel like I am in the prime of my career. Like, I feel like I can go with anybody on TV, anybody on the independents that's, making their name around. Like, and that confidence level for me is, I know I can go out there and I can control that crowd however I want to. And I know what I can do from a story perspective within the match and get the ultimate result of what that promoter is looking for out of that match with the person that I'm working with. But I think, again, it just takes years of continuing to get the reps and do it over and over and over again. But also, again, knowing that if something goes wrong in the match, I'm not going to panic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to keep doing what we're doing, and we'll find a way to get back on track. If we've got to call an audible, we'll call an audible. So I think a lot of that is just over years of repetition of doing it. But I also, I was very confident too, because of what the brand was that they were trying to get across, right? I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to get myself kind of consistently back into that New England area. And I also knew that I was very different from everybody else on that roster.
Yeah.
Not just from a character or persona perspective, but an in-ring perspective. I knew my style was completely different than anybody else. And not that I was trying to one-up anybody. I was just trying to be the best Shawn Donavan I could be for that brand, for that crowd, and for wherever the person putting things together behind the scenes wanted to take it.
So the one thing that I've been pumped to ask you about, but one thing I want to, it's kind of a two-parter. The one thing I see that you do all the time still, which is great because I feel like it's not done as much, are the promos. But to go with that, the one thing I might watch, like I still admit I watch it like twice a month maybe, was the series you did on There's No Respect in Pro Wrestling.
Yeah.
What was your mindset in doing it, and like the ideas and like things like that? Because I'll still watch all the parts nowadays, and like I feel like I don't know what you're seeing, but like in New England, I feel like a lot of this stuff still holds. So like,
Right.
what was your theory behind that? Because man, I still watch that all the time.
I appreciate that. I would love to do more of those. Just unfortunately, being able to partner with the person who I felt was right for filming and editing it, their schedule, my schedule with, my real life and wrestling just kind of got in the way. And there's actually still two parts I don't think I've ever actually released, which
Oh
kind of
Lord.
makes me want to put them all
Yeah.
back together and just upload them on social media. But really, the idea kind of, it came from the COVID era where there was no wrestling, and I was trying some different things to, like a lot of us were, to try and stay relevant, because in that time frame nobody really knew when anything would open back up. And when it did open back up, there were still a lot of apprehensions from performers, promoters, fans, all of that. So I was just trying to find different ways of staying relevant, so to speak. I tried doing my own thing. It just didn't have the right feel to it.
Yeah.
I didn't like it. And, I ended up having a conversation with Brutal Bob Evans, Uncle Bob, as everybody likes to call him, if you know Bob.
Yeah.
The man is a wealth of knowledge, and really, if you ever get a chance to talk to Bob, he'd be great for your show. For me, he was someone that when I hit him up about wanting to just kind of pick his brain, really kind of like challenged me based on what he felt my persona or character was and where it could go. And really kind of challenged me to really think outside the box. And I remember maybe a couple of weeks after we had that conversation, I was watching a movie, and I can't remember for the life of me what it was. And the way that they filmed it was like the character was in the scene, but then they would walk away from the scene and they would just continue to walk down the street and just talk into the camera. And I thought it was like so cool.
Yeah.
And literally, again, I just talked about the proverbial light bulb goes off. And I'm like, well, what if I just start spitballing about my feelings about the way the industry is going with my character, and try something like that? And I guess, it worked. I mean, the first
Yeah.
episode I think had like over like 10,000 views, and
Wow.
like it got a lot of like praise. But again, doing that, you have to also have the confidence to know that what you're saying is not just how you really feel,
Mm-hmm.
but you also have to know it's probably going to piss some people
Right.
off. But that's just the way it is, right? You're never going to please everybody at the end of the day. Yes, you're going to ruffle some feathers with the things that you say in promos or the things that you do, but you're not trying to do anything malicious. You're trying to push the envelope of your character. You're trying to get what your brand is across. And all I'm doing is just taking how I feel and, again, turning the volume up with a little bit of an entertainment level to it. That's what it became. And again, if some people are going to be upset, or if I'm not talking about me, but anybody who cuts a
Right.
promo about the general nature of the industry. I mean, you see what happens on social media these days. The moment somebody gives an opinion about how they feel about the industry, and there's somebody in the industry, it's like a swarm of like lions on a dead carcass. Like,
Yeah.
everyone has their own take, and it's okay. We're all allowed to have opinions. I think just treat the opinions respectfully. Don't just, like, excuse my French, shit on the
Yeah.
opinion. Try to understand the perspective of where that individual is coming from. It's okay to agree to disagree. But that's where the antithesis of those promo ideas came from. And I wanted to do it in a completely, just different way. And the guy that filmed it and shot it, he completely understood my vision. I let him be completely creative with how he wanted to film it, edit it, background music. Like, I saw the first one, I'm like, dude, this is a hit. We've got to do
Yeah.
more of these. Again, it just got to a point where our schedules were just completely off kilter. But who knows? Maybe I'll find a way to bring it back again in the future if our stars align.
So another thing that you mentioned, you've been in the game for a while. What are, like, it doesn't have to be like a specific match, but like, what are some of the things that you're most proud of that you've got to do, or something you've had your hand in wrestling so far?
I think for me, again, I said it before, like, all the places I've been able to travel to, I mean, I don't think some of the states that I've wrestled in, I probably would ever really visit,
Mhm.
because I'm more of an international guy that
Yeah.
I like to take vacations internationally, not around the US. Um, but I think just, the thing I'm most proud of is, well, I want to say most proud of, but one of the things I'm proud of is the fact that a lot of the individuals that were household names when I was growing up are now peers of mine. People that I've shared locker rooms with, gotten to work with some of them, and they will contact me on social media from time to time when they see things, whether it's a promo or a clip of a match, and they'll provide advice, or, again, just seeing a lot of them in locker rooms and being able to chop it up with them and getting to know them is something that's like really cool. Like, if
Mhm.
you asked 10-year-old me, would I ever have the opportunity to wrestle Haku? I'd say no.
Yeah.
But I had the ability to work with him, and the ability for him to not just provide feedback to me afterwards, but literally sat there for close to a half hour and just gave me advice on different things about the industry. So that's one area. I think number two, what I'm most proud of is the relationships and friendships that I have been able to have in the industry.
Mhm.
My my four best friends I can count, or five best friends I can count on one hand, and they're all in this industry.
Nice.
And they're all guys that I know would have my back in any situation. There are also guys that I know that if I were to call them at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, I need you to help me hide a dead body, they would.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I would do anything like that. But I think, again, now I think what I'm really most proud of too is, again, the individuals that I'm coaching now, that are really starting to make a name for themselves, that are getting out there. I'm really proud of that. And I'm just really proud of the fact that I have been able to dip my hands in a number of different areas in the industry,
Mm-hmm.
from commentating, behind the scenes work, helping book shows, helping produce shows, like all those different pieces. And then a fun, cool fact is, I have wrestled on live TV for every major promotion out there in the US at least once. Like, to me, that's pretty cool. The only one I'm missing is Ring of Honor. I will
Nice.
get there.
Nice.
But, to say that I've been able to do that is a pretty cool feat. And not that I would ever, really put that out there on social media. That's just
Yeah.
not me. But just personally for me, that's like a really cool feat from a really overweight, unathletic kid to say that he's been able to do that, when I
Yeah.
think back. So, but those are things I'm really most proud of. But overall, out of all those, I'm really proud of the fact that I've played a role in helping mentor and coach a lot of young guys in this industry, that I see nothing but what they say, sky is the limit, as long
Mm-hmm.
as they continue to do what they're doing.
So to go with that, you said you've been in the game for a while. What are some things yet you haven't accomplished that you want to?
Well, I haven't wrestled for Ring of Honor yet, so
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
definitely one piece there. I have a bucket list of talents that are out there that have been doing this almost as long as me, if not longer than me, to younger guys really making a name for themselves. So I have a bucket list of guys
Nice.
that I really want to still get in the ring with and test myself against and see what we can create. I still would like to do a lot more backstage work, putting matches together, producing matches. Hey, we would all, we all get in this game because we all want to make it big,
Right.
right?
Right.
Still, obviously, on that bucket list, would love to be able to, work for a major national TV organization in any, in any capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's in front of the camera, behind the camera, would absolutely love an opportunity to do that. I will continue to keep plugging away as long as my body and my mind lets me, to try to achieve that goal. But really, just my ultimate thing is just, I'm at a point in my career where I'm having fun.
Nice.
You know,
Yeah.
it I'm not at that point where I was early in my career, where, again, which should be everybody's goal, right? But the constant grind of trying to get everywhere, work everywhere, get that elusive contract, I'm at a point where I'm having a great time in my career and having great matches, and just want to continue doing all of that for as long as I possibly can. And really
And,
just want to leave a mark on this industry positively, when my name comes up.
and you kind of mentioned it, but the last thing I like to ask everyone on the podcast, I learned in performing arts, but it goes with wrestling, is legacy. The day
Mhm.
that you finally decide to hang up the boots, what do you want Shawn Donovan's legacy to be? What do you want people to remember you for in professional wrestling?
Um, as someone that you can see from their matches literally gave you everything they had when they're out there, whether it was in front of 5 people, 50 people, 500 people. I gave you your money's worth. On a flip side, I would like my legacy, even behind the scenes, to be that individual that, while yet sometimes opinionated, which I can be, because it's just for the love and the passion of the tradition and the legacy of our industry as a whole, you know, I want people to know that I was a good person behind the scenes too. Always willing to give people advice, always willing to watch people's matches, always willing to help give advice, and just being a good person, you know, behind the scenes that people can trust and respect. And again, like I said before, you're not going to win everybody over. That's just the way that it is. But for the most part, I hope that is what my legacy is at the end of the day.
Well, Shawn, thank you so much for doing this. Like I said, it's pretty crazy to me. I never would have thought I would have had you on as a guest. It's really a full circle moment for me, so I really do appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you, man. It's kind of a full circle moment for me, meeting you in a parking lot at an
Yeah,
XWA show, and you come into those shows. And
yeah.
like I said, I'm very happy for you for what you are striving for, not just in your personal life, but what you're trying to strive for, making a career out of what you're doing in the wrestling industry. You know, you were always a respectful fan, and it shows to what you're doing now with stuff you're doing up in the New England area. So kudos to you. Keep doing what you're doing. Stay on that train. Don't give up.
Thank you, man. And thank you, everybody, for watching episode 6. Chris Sanders out. Character to Canvas podcast. Thank you.